We can't hear the music, Aaron, if you're playing it.
All right. Welcome, everybody, to the Liberty Collaborative podcast. I'm one of the hosts, Aaron Bowman. And with me today is Mike Hancock, Chris Coyle, and Kay Carl Smith. And today we're going to be discussing From Grief to Mission, the faith and the courage of Charlie Kirk and how to carry his vision forward. And, you know, we had a real big loss about 7 days ago now, I think maybe 8 days ago. And there's been a lot of grief. There's been a lot of people online saying really nasty things. And, you know, he was more than a political figure. I mean, he wasn't in an elected office, Charlie, but he led a movement across this country, which is something we haven't seen in a very long time. And so we just wanted to kind of discuss this, look at this from a couple different angles. And it's all about truth, freedom, and making sure that doesn't collapse. So I will open this up. Welcome, everybody. Who would like to start? Want to go right around the table? Go for it, Mike.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and kick it off. You know, the thing that I've been thinking about over the last 24, 48 hours is, again, certainly Charlie's impact. And but most of all, I was thinking about, well, how did Charlie do what he actually did? And if you study Charlie, you know that he led with his faith in God. And that was where he got his strength from. He understood that he was created in the image of God, that he is a free man, that as a child of God, that, you know, he is responsible for watching out for his brothers and sisters. And you do that first and foremost by standing with courage and then boldly proclaiming the truth, God's truth. And that's the thing that I saw that most attracted me to Charlie, is that he stood in the place of truth. Now, did he always get everything exactly right and say things exactly right? No, no one does. But you knew that his heart was coming from a place of bringing us all together as a nation, as a world, to ultimately follow Christ and to come together in love. And so that's the big thing for me about Charlie is his boldness, his bravery, his standing on truth, and being unwilling to bend from that truth.
Yeah. And so I don't want to add to that because I don't want to mess it up. But let me the angle I want to go into is about free speech.
Yeah.
Because free speech does not mean a freedom from responsibility. And we've seen that in Kimball's comments and other liberals across the country who are making mockery of Charlie's assassination.
Yeah, that's you guys. My input and angle in today's show really touches on one thing, but I want to dig into a second point. First of all, touching on, I think, Michael, Kay, Carl, Aaron, what we've talked about is the unfounding, the unhooking of a generation and a growing group of people who have no foundational moral compass. And as we get into it, I want to talk about the fact that one can mock Christianity, one can sort of look at those Bible thumpers, but what people don't understand is, as far back as Greeks, religion and faith was a way of organizing modern society. It gave rise to conduct, to rules, to moral codes. So I think we need to plumb that a little bit because clearly it's unanchored. We've lost it. But then tactically, I believe we can dig into helping people navigate from, Kay Carl, your words, from confrontations to conversations. And it's really some tactics and ideas on how to not buy into the false narrative, not not take their framing of something, not let them conflate or create equivalency. So we're going to get into that because these aren't equivalent. And you see this equivalency argument being used all the way back to the Holocaust. You see it, K. Carl, with Frederick Douglass, how they take, and you've mentioned this, Michael, you wrote a piece on it, how people still to this day misquote and misconstrue his 4th of July speech. Totally put it in a total false context. So, Aaron, I look forward to getting into this. It's important for our listeners to hear this and take away some actions.
Yeah. And, so we did the vigil here outside of campus. And when I had posted that online.
In University of Connecticut, for people who don't know where we are.
Yeah, University of Connecticut on the Storrs campus, and put it together in about a half hour, put it out there. One of the amazing things that happened from it is I had somebody that I know in town reach out to me and said, "Hey, Aaron," she was crying a little bit on the phone. This really hit her hard. And she goes, "I never really grew up in a church family, but I really need to start going to church. I want to start going, my husband and I. Where do you go to church, and can we come with you?" And I was like, wow, that's pretty powerful right there. How God works through certain things. And when I brought them to church that day, our pastor actually was on vacation. He came back home because he wanted to be with the members of the church. So he wasn't actually preaching that day. And there were a ton of people in there. And then as I watched the news, people were saying that more people had gone to church this past Sunday than ever before, like records. Like, you have the people that go to church on Easter and Christmas Eve and that sort of thing. But it was really packed. And to see that movement of, this tragedy that took place, but now it's starting to bring people together and they're starting to wake up. And when you brought up Jimmy Kimball, he's just one of the many examples of teachers losing their job for saying ridiculous thing. There was here in Farmington, you had Bill Beckert, who posted on his Facebook, "They reap what they sow." And
who is he, Aaron? He was the superintendent? Or
no, he is the chairman of the Farmington Board of Ed. And he had made that comment, and he needs, he should step down. And it just goes to show you that words do matter, and you have to be responsible for what you say as an adult. And I am looking forward to really diving into this today because
Aaron, if I could take that one, what you just said, this is a group that claimed 6 months ago that words are violence. Words are violence. And remember microaggressions, and they were literally creating constructs to interfere and infringe on people's First Amendment right. Saying, when you say that, well, folks, let's fast forward. When your words promulgate violence, excuse violence, suggest violence, those really are unacceptable in modern culture and hopefully will be legally actionable. So right off on this show, we want to make sure listeners, because Michael, you said it, and Kate, Carl, and Aaron, we want people to honor Charlie Kirk by doing something. Opinions don't change the world. Action does. And remember, words that promulgate violence are offensive. They're wrong. But words that speak the truth, whether they call them whatever they call them, those aren't wrong.
Exactly.
Right. Absolutely. Mike.
Let me just say this. Let me just call it for what it is. When you think about the left, I'm speaking as a former Democrat, they're hypocrites. They're hypocrites. They would had a liberal activist been murdered and somebody made some derogatory comments about their death, they've been all over social media and the mainstream media criticizing and demanding respect. But when it comes to the other side, come to conservatives, the left only want free speech when it benefits them.
Well, and K. Carl, I sent you guys an article from one of my favorite sources of really good reporting, the Free Press. And in it, it cites a poll, several polls, that I think create a sort of foundational fact here that you can't avoid. That poll said that 74% of Democrats prefer what they call Democrat socialism over capitalism. 74%. Another poll apparently found the literally opposite with Republicans. 74%. I'm amazed those percentages, by the way, match. See capitalism as the better process. So remember, we're starting with a group that believes seizing other people's property from their free will, pursuit of happiness, and redistributing it the way they see fit is a better system. So when you keep going, Michael, you talked about this, how these people operate. One of the first things you do is you delegitimize, you dehumanize your
Absolutely.
opponents.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. Yeah. So how else can you just take their stuff, right? You can take the stuff because they literally no longer exist. Property is a big thing. You know, I've had these conversations with people, and you know, I'm sitting there and I'm talking to someone I know actually loves property, right? But they fundamentally don't really understand the difference between progressive thought and conservative thought. Their and their positions are all built around what I would call emotional triggers. Triggers like, oh, somebody is a racist. Now, when you really dig into it and ask him to explain to you, well, what is a racist, or what did the person say that makes them a racist? They literally have nothing, right? Literally have nothing. So, you know, it's interesting today because we're dealing with people that just are in a mental space that makes them incapable of having a deep, thoughtful conversation. They seem to be stuck in this emotional belief that, you know, if you don't believe like them, or you believe or you support somebody that they believe something bad about, then you're bad too. Or at the very least, if you're a friend, I'll just sort of ignore you and
Yeah,
maybe
Michael, didn't we see this whole false narrative, right? To me, the moment that sort of crystallized what was going on was when the reporter at NASCAR says, "Oh, they're cheering for the driver," and everyone says, "No, you know, they're saying F Joe Biden," and they said, "No, they're saying let's go Brandon." And
Yeah.
for the first time, just like the Nike swoosh do it, it crystallized the lie, the line going on, and then mostly peaceful protests while there are flames behind. How can you make this up? The reporter, the lack of self-awareness that there are flames, billions of dollars, or Nancy Pelosi saying, well, they're just blowing off a little steam, right? These, or now more currently, is it Jeffries, some of the top leaders in Congress saying, I'll punch him in the face? So I'm sorry, guys, but those are unacceptable. And the reason I think it happens, the structure of socialism, collectivism means control. And when you have control, K. Carl, what Frederick Douglass wrote about, it means there's only one approved narrative. And so you
Right.
can sort of see what's going on here. That
You know, no, go ahead, Chris. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you
no,
off
I
there.
was just going to say that we'll get into a minute, sort of some of the tactics and facts that you need to, people listening to the show need to do their homework. They need to be able to talk about history. But I was only going to point out that if people want to take their faith, if they want to take their belief, they've got to start to speak up, because it's so clear what's happening. And only by a sustained movement, a majority, a generational shift in America, regardless of who gets elected, there's got to be a shift in opposition to this really dangerous direction the country's going with these people.
Right. And I'm going to make these 3 points, Chris and Mike and K. Carl. So, Mike, like you said, people say stuff and they don't really understand what it means. Like, if you talk to most people, say, well, what is fascist? What makes somebody a fascist? Or what is fascism? What is a Marxist? They really don't know. And they use terms that they don't know. So, like with me and my kids, I said, don't use a word unless you know what it means. So people, like you said, Chris, they need to do a little homework on what those words actually mean, because the left is constantly spewing them: fascist, racist, Nazi, all that stuff. Then, too, the inflammatory comments, like you were talking about. We have good old Chris Murphy here saying, oh, prepare to go to war with the right. Like, that's not helping the situation any. And people wonder why these individuals in this.
Aaron, not helping. Don't give him any credit. Come on.
No, he's not.
Say it stronger. Those words are disgusting.
Yeah.
They're inciting violence. And Chris Murphy has to be called out for the joke that he is, a guy who's never had a real job. His job is to say things like this. It's got to be called out. We've been too nice.
You're right. And the third point is that quiet majority. We cannot be the quiet majority anymore. And I'm not saying that we need like kinetic type warfare, but we need to stand up like Charlie did, talk to people, have those conversations and say, no, you're wrong. If you're a man and you're pretending to be a woman, like I sat in this group the other day, and I kid you not, gentlemen, the lady goes, well, wasn't he gay? He was living with his lover. And the lady next to her goes, oh no, honey, he wasn't gay because he's transitioning to be a woman. I was like, you can't make this stuff up.
That's even worse.
It stopped.
In my opinion,
it is. Stop trying to make it something that it's not. Let's start calling a duck, and what is going on with all these chemicals and medication that's giving
there's
this
some weird thing going around that.
Some mental illness, because the last 3 shooters have all been from that transgender community.
Well, and you can say this, Michael and Kate Carl. I've heard this before. Let's not, and this gets into the theory of conflation. People try and conflate a boy's right to feel like a girl with a girl's right to safety, pursuit of happiness. The second is a right. The first that I mentioned is the right to feel something. They're not the same. So if a boy wants to feel like a turtle, great.
Go for
feel
it.
like it. We'll respect that. But don't conflate it with my daughter's right to use a bathroom in privacy. The right to spend their whole life trying to play soccer. And then Bobby says he feels like a girl. And look at the guys, this famous guy at Penn. I know I'm getting off on a tangent, but we haven't called it out. And finally, Penn said we were wrong. The NCAA took the trophy back. But look how much damage was done because no one called it out. No one backed those girls up, right? We were all quiet.
Yep.
I want to dive into the point you were talking about those statistics, Chris, in terms that 74% of the people on the left love the idea of Marxism over capitalism. And what I discovered over the years traveling the country and speaking to a lot of liberal groups and individuals, and I found out that most people who embrace Marxism, they've only heard one side of the argument. They never heard the liberty message of Frederick Douglass. And when I share that with them, there's awakening that comes to being. And I kind of tied into Thomas Sowell. He was interviewed one time because, when Thomas Sowell started off, he was devout Marxist.
Yep.
And they said, well, what happened? He said, I finally heard the other side of the argument. So but I want to encourage your listeners to become a better message of liberty, because most folks who've been indoctrinated into Marxism have never heard the liberty message of Frederick Douglass. And when they hear it, it's a game changer.
And Kate
They
Carl,
change how they vote.
Put out a plug for you. Nobody has ever written a book until now, Kate Carl, with what you're about to announce that compares Karl Marx and Frederick Douglass. And your timing couldn't be better.
Absolutely.
So I can't wait till you release that book and you're on national talk shows. That really is the discussion, particularly in New York City, with this guy looking like he's going to win.
Yeah.
So, but if you follow this thread for a minute, and it's been pointed out quite a bit, but I think it's worth going back and just let's go through this sequentially. What Charlie Kirk did was first he put himself in the lion's den. He put himself in the cauldron where students were being brainwashed, and the other point of view was not only not allowed, there were professors being shut down, speakers like Ben Shapiro needed a police escort or they canceled events. So number one, he put himself in the lion's den. Number two is he listened to the other side. Prove me wrong was his tour. And, Aaron, I'll give the chairman of the Republican Party in Connecticut credit. He pointed out that it's listening to people. We can talk about what we believe, but it's listening to what they believe and ask them effective questions. And we're going to get into that in a minute about how you might do that. But you got to have listening. Why do you feel that way?
Chris, there's some people that listen but still don't do anything.
Yeah.
That's some of the problem I have. Some of these, they listen well, but what actions are you taking after the fact? After you gain and gather all this data, what are you doing with it? You're sitting on it. The
amount of folks who bounce around in their echo chamber, or Aaron, I've heard this a lot in our area. They'll say, "Well, I'm a strong MAGA supporter," and I said, "Well, that's nice, but what does that actually mean?
Right?
How are you going to talk to all the people who don't like personality politics, who are trying to understand what that means?" Now, if they were to translate the greatness of America into our founding values and our constitutional principles and a right you share, then you're going to create, K. Carl, you guys, a conversation versus a confrontation. Using slogans is not the way to go, I don't think.
No, absolutely not. I think that was the beauty of Charlie. If you look at him and you watch him and you study his approach to tackling these issues, he says he has a conversation. He treated everyone with respect. So when you hear these people talking about how divisive he was and how he didn't treat people with respect, I've seen pastors calling him in their pulpit to their congregation that he's a white supremacist, right? All of which are just so easily provable to be lies. You know, he was a genius. And I hate to use the word genius because we all can do that, right? There's nothing special about that except that we've got to do our homework. We've got to sit down. We've got to study the Constitution, right? We've got to study the Declaration of Independence and understand what that means. We've got to study people like Charlie or people like Frederick Douglass, right? Who stood on their faith, stood on the foundation of their faith and principles and values, and that's
Michael, look at your journey in K. Carl, but look at you and Stephanie. I don't know what the starting point on your journey was, but I know that you went to an intensive, almost year training and learning about or relearning the Constitution, learning about Frederick Douglass. I think that's where you met K. Carl, and the listeners need to know you guys tried twice, second time successful, to win election to the Aurora, is it County Council?
No, Aurora City Council.
City Council in a largely Democrat environment by speaking these messages. So now you write, you're on this podcast. So your journey, you guys have left big ripples by taking action. It's not easy. You had to put aside other things to do that.
Well, Chris, let me go back to what you said, where we started. Where we started was at a class being offered at our church called Biblical Citizenship. That class basically was all about encouraging people who are Christians to get out and get involved in the political process, right? And Stephanie and I, that's where it really started, with our faith. Right? Standing up for our faith, standing up for what's right, and standing up for the truth, and allowing what I would say God to lead us down that path to ultimately victory in that seat on the city.
Okay, Carl, you just keeping this going. You focus on Apostle Paul and the whole idea of how do you take a concept and evangelize it, but you get into their area, you communicate, you connect. I think you're part of what you say about how you get that message out is amazing.
Oops.
I agree with you 100%.
Do you want to tell the listeners a little bit about that?
You just said it. I mean, I can't add to that. But no, you're exactly right. It's I just had a senior moment, man. What did you say?
Well, what struck me,
I was so enamored about your comments about me. I said, "Who is he talking about?" But go ahead.
Hey, I hope you get to what Frederick Douglass said about the First Amendment. But in a lot of your speeches around the country, when people say, "Okay, Carl, I get the Frederick Douglass stuff. He helped found the Republican Party, but how do we get the message out?" And you go to the Bible and tell the story of how he named himself, how he got out there and became credible, spreading the word of God.
I just wanted you to articulate that because I want to make sure I'm doing a good job of teaching you everything.
Did I do all right?
You did very good. You did very good. You fell for that one,
Michael. You can see I'm the athletic scholarship guy in the Frederick Douglass Republican College.
There you go. But no, you're exactly right. Douglass was when I started studying Douglass, and I didn't get it in high school or college, just from my own individual reading. This whole idea how he was a practical thinker and has helped me to be a practical thinker. How the slave master used the Bible to justify slavery. And here come Frederick Douglass come back and use the Bible to end slavery, and then start speaking, leveraging the First Amendment to articulate that and taking. It's powerful when you leverage the First Amendment and your message is grounded in truth. That's powerful, and that's what Douglass did. That's what Charlie did. Exactly.
Yeah. Oh, K. Carl, I've got a quick question for you.
Yeah.
So, was Frederick Douglass the first Christian nationalist?
I don't know what a Christian nationalist is.
That's what I'm saying. I don't know what it is.
What's a Christian nationalist? Yeah, I don't know what that is.
I have no idea what that is.
Yeah.
But his journey, K. Carl, just interesting for listeners about their journey. And Aaron, what you said, more people going to church. At first, correctly so, he called out the hypocrisy of these Southern slave owners who go to church on Sunday and performance art. They're in the church saying and pounding the Bible, and they're pounding slaves on Monday morning. But he came to find its power over time and its strength. And perhaps this event, Aaron, is going to help a lot of other people do that.
Yes.
Yeah, I think so. And so I was looking up different quotes from different people, and I came across this one from Sam Adams, and it said, "The liberties of our country, the freedom of our civil constitution are worth defending at all hazards, and it is our duty to defend them against all attacks." And what I found interesting in that is that he said all hazards. It wasn't just one particular thing. It was, I look at it as hazards from outside and within. And when we have this rhetoric that this one side is bad, they're fascists, they're Nazis, they're Marxists, they're tyrants, we need to understand that that is one of those hazards that we need to defend our civil constitution from. And that's when I was talking about the silent majority, that we need to stop being silent. One thing we learned from Charlie Kirk is that we need to find our voice and be able to articulate our side of the liberty message, and bring in Frederick Douglass into that.
I want to add something in, and dovetail what Michael said. They always call Charlie, they call him divisive. And any conservative that's saying something powerful, they're saying you're divisive. But what that really means is, by calling Charlie divisive, it really means that Charlie struck a nerve.
Absolutely.
Charlie struck a nerve, and they just felt the truth. They felt the truth, and it hurts. So they got to call him divisive.
Yeah, that's right. Well, and the truth divides.
That's right. That's right.
So
yeah, he was divisive.
Right. The truth is on one side and lies is on the other side. That's
right.
the division.
That's right. You're on the wrong side. Yeah, it's going to hurt you.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
Hey, Carl, you write so well about this, but there is one right that Frederick Douglass, to me, was strongest about, and was the First Amendment. Right? And what did he say about it's the one that tyrants fear most?
He said the freedom of speech is the first thing that tyrants attack because they know the power of it.
Yes.
Because if I have freedom of speech, I can tell the world about what you're doing to me, okay, right, and reveal your wickedness. Tyrants don't like that. Marxists don't like that.
Right.
And look at, if it weren't for the change in the executive branch, if it weren't for this guy Musk, who bought Twitter and turned it X and released the Twitter files, and now, of course, battling in Europe, this real systemic effort to erode the First Amendment, and now the media and the left collaborating to drown it out, spin it, repeat lies. You really see that the First Amendment is under assault, and it takes lots of different shapes and forms. It's not just saying, well, you can't say it's, you dilute it. Okay, Carl, there's something else Frederick Douglass said about it. He said, there are really two wrongs here, right? It's the person speaking, but it's people hearing. And I think, guys, they were more worried about the kids listening to Charlie Kirk.
Absolutely.
Yep.
That was a point I was going to make earlier, because and it's very important. And we kind of talked about, I kind of mentioned before, the fear of free speech. And the reason why we got some people who are indoctrinated into Marxism and believe in things and think it's cool, because they never heard the other side of the argument. And once you articulate the other side of the argument, and especially by leveraging Douglas' liberty message versus Marxism, you see people have an immediate change in many cases that I dealt with, even at the dinner table, dealing with some of these Marxist knuckleheads that I encounter every day. That's being indoctrinated in the high school level, and they have my bloodline. But Douglas changed all that.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. And Chris, you brought up X, so I just want to say to the people that are online, feel free to leave a comment or a question. We'll answer it here. And those that are on YouTube, you can leave a question and it'll pop right up here on the screen, and we'll answer that for you. If you have a question or like to join the conversation, we'd love to hear what you have to say.
And Aaron, if I could, the vigil you did at University of Connecticut on Saturday, guys, Aaron had to put that together in a matter of hours. And to see the diversity of people, the young women who said, I never thought I would say anything, but I'm going to say something. A gentleman who was visiting from Italy who couldn't even speak English, someone translated for him, and how much his kids love this country and love Charlie Kirk's speaking. It really, Aaron, was mind-boggling at the diversity, just age, gender, nationality. It couldn't be more amazing. But I do want to point this out. We had some hecklers. And what we pointed out to the hecklers, to our group or this crowd that Aaron had built, Aaron, several hundred people, is that we're not going to react in kind. We are not going to shout at them. We are not. And if anything, we'd invite them to have a dialogue. But we reminded people, K. Carl, of the rock in the church in Rochester, New York, that bounced off Frederick Douglass' head. He was heckled. And you said he was more than heckled. He was beat with clubs, everything. But they couldn't stop the man.
After he'd been hit in the head with sticks, rocks, fists, and the man almost died. He went back and spoke. So he was committed to the cause, is my point. And that's what we have to. We got to be committed to a cause.
So the symbolism of that rock in the glass case in the church is here, his forbearance, his ability to not let them intimidate him, not to strike back, because he was a strong guy. I mean, he could have he used the power of his thinking and his words. And that's the reason that rock to me always reminds me of what the lesson Frederick Douglass gave us about speaking the truth and not being intimidated. In his case, physical violence.
He was dedicated to the cause of righteousness, right? Speaking truth to power. And that's the issue that I think sometimes, that's the point that sometimes gets lost. Slavery, yes, he was dealing with that, but he was dealing it out of the context of truth and righteousness, right? He was following his Lord, right, in doing what he had to do. It wasn't like just a Frederick Douglass thing. That's, if it's not just a Charlie Kirk thing.
Right.
Those people acting.
Right.
And here's the thing about Charlie and Frederick Douglass and many others. To get their point across, they did not engage in violence to get their point across. They stuck with truth and the ability to speak their heart and mind, the First Amendment. And that's powerful than any bullet, any rock or stone, because you can't kill the truth. You can't kill it. You may kill the messenger.
Guys, look at
it's going to move.
The black economy, I mean, the underground economy in Russia, communist state, right? The thing that keeps it going is capitalism. Look at China. They got quiet. Capitalism is their lifeline to reality. It's not the communist state. It doesn't work. But guys, if we could pivot this conversation a minute to some practical tips and sort of some guidelines for people listening on how to engage. And I think one of the things, Kay, Carl, and Michael, you talked about is the importance to do your homework. And I brought up, do not buy into false narratives of the left. Don't start debating them on their terms, because half the time the statement they're making or the point they're trying to get across is false. It is a false narrative. They're trying to use equivalency or conflation, various things, saying, well, this is like that. No, it's not like that. Or explain to me what you mean. So, guys, I think it might be useful. We talked about do your homework. It isn't hard today, Aaron, to go online, go on your phone, use one of these AI engines, say, what did Frederick Douglass say? What does this mean?
Yeah, that's a good point. And there's now, K. Carl, I don't know if I have this right, but didn't Frederick Douglass, because Mike was just talking about being truthful and honest, isn't there a quote or something he said where it was something about a nation being honest, truthful, and virtuous, or something along those lines? And that was kind of, Mike, what you were saying, that it's more than just them; it's what they stood for and their principles and values.
Yeah, you're exactly right. And Douglas, I can't recall verbatim the quote, but yeah, you hit it on the head. He said, in order for a nation to survive, it must be virtuous and the people must be righteous. Um, and that's something that's true. I want to say this too before I forget my thought or have another senior moment. Talk about moving forward. I think what the left has done, and I give the left, I'm putting the responsibility in, because I'll be foolish to not to think they were behind this in some way. He did have left wing thinking. Is that they just unleashed a hornet's nest by assassinating Charlie Kirk, because you got a lot of people. I'm talking to young black kids now, including my 14-year-old son, who was never much involved in politics, paying attention to it. I picked him up from school the other day. He was listening to a Charlie Kirk podcast and caught me off guard. I said, "Why are you listening to it?" He said, "Dad, I want to know, why did they kill this man? What was he talking about? They got people so angry and mad." We need to leverage that. We need to leverage Charlie Kirk's podcast. And I'm gonna get with Turning Point and say, you gotta create a website, get that out there.
Right.
Because people are hungry for it. And I'm seeing young black kids. My son says, "I just me, Dad. I got my friends in my classroom. We're talking about this." And they are talking about why. Because they see on their phone by this man being shot down like an animal. I wonder why they do this to this man. What did he say? What was he all about? We gotta leverage that. That's how we're gonna.
Huge.
I think we gotta do that better and get that out there.
Absolutely.
And that's amazing that your son's into that and looking at it. I was listening to one of his podcasts today about one of the other different parts of Turning Point USA, their action group. And it's good that people are searching that out and that's smart for your son to say to himself, well, I need to know why somebody was murdered like this, was assassinated. And going back to what we were talking about the truth and virtuous, I don't remember who it was. It was one of the founding fathers, and maybe one of you guys remember, where you're talking about the Constitution and the U.S. is only for a righteous group or a righteous person. And if you're not a righteous person, then you can't govern. And I think if we start looking at this and going back to our history, we start to see that, yes, they had their Judeo-Christian values, and this all comes back to faith and not putting the state above God or whatever your belief system is that is the higher power. And that's, I think, what Charlie did and a lot of our founders.
That you're allowed to believe that it is freedom to believe that, which is the opposite is constricting, intimidating, not to believe, not to practice, not to talk out there. Guys, one of the things that we talk about all the time is to start asking again. I want to come back to the Charlie Kirk ability to listen. And if you watch him listening to students, you know what he did? One, he wouldn't interrupt. He'd sit there like this. And two, he would ask them what they meant.
Absolutely.
And all the time in my little town in Connecticut, Republicans, I've been personally criticized. And I'll say to my friends on the other side, why don't you talk about what you stand for? I'm clear what I stand for. What do you stand for? What exactly does that mean? And I think what people will find, and I think K. Carl Rush Limbaugh talked about this, and a lot of commentators, is if you'll actually listen to them, like Charlie Kirk did so well, ask them what they mean, and keep going and say, so is this like this? And eventually, because many of these arguments are emotionally based or sensationally charged to make a point, they really will become frustrated. They'll become angry with you and emotional. They'll then accuse you of attacking you. And we know how this goes. You first deny, then you counterattack, and you ultimately say you're the victim and Charlie Kirk's being mean. But it starts with listening and asking what they mean.
One thing about asking questions, get this, Aaron, I'm going to shut up the rest of the time we got. I always ask questions because I can find out within the first 25 words if they're worth me engaging. Because most folks, if you had a crowbar, you can't get a good idea in their head because they're so stuck. So you ask the question, first 25 words, you can know if you're wasting your time or not.
Yep. And Chris, that's a great point. I was just watching. The guy's name is Is it Cornell West? Is that his name?
Oh yeah, Cornell. Yeah.
He lost it on this debate about the whole assassination with Charlie. Like, he got up, started ripping his mic off because they were challenging his ideologies and his values, and he did not want any part of that. And it just goes to show you, Chris, to your point, when you start asking him those questions, you listen. Okay, well, what is that? What do you mean by that? What would that look like? When you start asking those questions to really get past the surface level discussion, I mean, that's embarrassing. You just stand up and walk out on live TV because
watch
you're
Douglas Murray, guys. Look up Douglas Murray and watch some of his debates and how he carefully, calmly asks people what they mean. Ben Shapiro, there are a lot of good examples of listening and pulling it apart. You know, Aaron, in our little state, we've got a lot of politicians talking about affordable housing or the homeless. So and Michael, I want to throw this to you, just doing homework. It's easier and easier for an old fart like me to even do homework. So I said, well, I wonder how many homeless there are in our state, plus or minus 3,500. I said, how many illegal immigrants in our state? You ready for this? 167,000.
Wow.
How much did our state spend on illegal immigrants last year? 1.3 billion. So I go, wow, how do we reconcile those numbers? 3,500 homeless, 167 illegal immigrants that must be in a home somewhere, probably paid for by the government, because they spent 1.3 billion. So I see, before we have any debate, why don't we understand what the problem is? So you got liberals saying, no, it's bad corporations, you know, it's bad communities that actually have zoning. What we're going to do is take more money and we're going to create another entitlement that makes you more reliant, K. Carl, on the socialist state and Michael.
Yep.
So that's just a little example, folks, of how you can do some quick research. I don't have an answer yet, but I do know that when you do those numbers, somebody's got some answers to give us, right? We got some questions. How do those numbers work?
Chris, you forgot about those bad Republicans, right?
That's right.
Who don't
not caring
in that state.
Uncaring.
Right.
Right.
And Chris, just so our listeners, I don't want anybody to be offended. They're not called homeless anymore. It's the unhoused.
Unhoused. Thank you.
No, but you bring up great points. And then, you know, we had good old Ned on TV yesterday coming out with these orders about, and not to get off topic, but how to deal with ICE in schools or ICE in other areas.
Courtroom, in the courts.
In the courtroom, yes, that's what it was. And listen, if ICE is showing up at the courtroom or in schools, they probably have done their homework and there's an actual reason why they're there, because there's somebody there that's dangerous. But of course, they don't ever say illegal immigrants. They just say immigrants. So
well, I feel insulted. Yesterday, I locked myself out of the house. I was unhoused, but I wasn't homeless.
That's good. Well, gentlemen, we are just at the 43-minute mark. Do we want to start wrapping this up?
Well, let me say this again, getting back to the point of our show today, which was to talk to people about what they can do next. And again, I think you look to people like Frederick Douglass, you look to Charlie Kirk, them standing on their faith. Well, you got to have faith to stand on it, right? A lot of what goes on in our culture today is really designed to send you into a mental state of not having faith, that everything is hopeless. It's not. There's as long as there's a God, which is through eternity, there's always hope. I think that learning how to engage people, don't be afraid to have people engage with you, to have disagreements, but to Chris's point, to K. Carl's point, you ask questions. When a person says something very emphatically to you that it's clear that they believe it, then ask them, well, please explain. Go into more detail. 9 times out of 10, probably 99 out of 100, you'll find that the person then freezes. And a clear sign of them freezing is when not only do they freeze, but then they almost have an emotional breakdown right? Because they don't want to ask the question. And what they will typically do is they'll start attacking you for even questioning the thought that they've actually had. So what I would say is, let's study Frederick Douglass. Let's study Charlie Kirk and the techniques that they're using. There's plenty of reading on Frederick Douglass, plenty of video on Charlie out there, so you can see how he peacefully, lovingly, and respectfully dealt with engaging people in seeking the truth.
I would say that
said.
to the listening audience, you see scrolling at the bottom of the screen there is our email address. And I say that because you got to get trained and turn to be effective when it comes to messaging. I had to be trained. I didn't know how to do this, but I was trained. And what you see before you are four guys who understand the art of persuasive messaging. Reach out to us. We'll be happy to come to your city, your home, wherever, put a group together. We could come collectively or individually and
Yep.
train you in the Frederick Douglass Republican engagement strategy.
Yep.
The message of liberty the left has no answer for. So seek training first. Remember now, the apostle was trained with 3 years before Christ sent them out to the world.
Yeah.
Get training.
Aaron, just my wrap-up thoughts are these. The way we honor anyone is by honoring what they stood for and what they did. And in Charlie Kirk's case, the biggest honor that we can pay him is to become active, to do what he did in some small way. And I say to people, it doesn't mean it means gathering 4 or 5 people and talking to them and getting them active with you. It's the students that might be listening to join and go talk to the Turning Point people on your campus and say, what are you all about? How can I be sure? But ask questions, be curious, guys. That's what I would leave it, is ask yourself, just K. Carl, like your son, what is this debate about? What are the stakes of this game? And become curious, become active, because ultimately opinions don't change the world. Action changes the world.
Yeah, well said, gentlemen. The only thing I will add to all this is 2 things. One thing is, I realize now this is not for me personally, not a right or left thing anymore. It really is a good versus evil at this point. And 2, one of the speakers that came up during the vigil that we held, he made a great point. It's kind of stuck in my head and I haven't been able to get it out. And he said, when he was up there talking to everybody, he said, don't try to be Charlie Kirk. Try to be the man he was trying to be. And because his faith was he was so deeply rooted in his faith, he was trying to be like God. He was trying to be like Jesus, to be that better person, to be strong in your faith. And that kind of hit home with me when he said that. I said, I haven't heard anybody say, don't try to be like Charlie Kirk. Try to be like the man he was trying to be like. Yeah. So I would put that there. That's where I'm going to leave it. Thank you, gentlemen, for being here. I'm going to play a little outro music that you guys can't hear, but everybody listening can. And I will see you all next Thursday on the Liberty Collaborative.